My cell phone slipped right out of my hand and hit the floor with a thud. The screen still glowed, showing the picture. It was my daughter, Hope, in a wedding gown, smiling next to a man I barely knew. Hope? Did you get married? Yeah, Mama. Yesterday. On the other end of the line, I could hear the sounds of the street. Cars, footsteps, voices, everything but excitement. Why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I invited? It was just a small thing, Mama. Only family. That word hammered in my head. Family. I picked up the phone, stared at that frozen smile on the screen, and understood. Maybe I had become an afterthought, a detail outside the frame. I deleted the picture, and in the silence that remained, a question formed that I still can't answer. What does a mother do when she stops being family? My name is Clara Mae Harrison, and for 67 years, I believed family was everything. I raised my daughter Hope alone after my husband Elijah passed away. I worked cleaning houses for 2 different families, the Rodwells and the Millers, to pay for her college. I saved every single dollar so she could have the wedding of her dreams. I always imagined I'd be right there beside her at the altar, holding her hand, watching her realize the biggest dream of any woman. But last Tuesday, as I was having my morning coffee and checking my phone, I saw a picture on Facebook that changed everything. There was Hope in a white dress next to her husband, Devin Hayes. The only people with them were his parents, Franklin and Eleanor Hayes. My eyes scanned every detail of that image multiple times. Hope was radiant, smiling like I had never seen her smile before. And the caption read, "Our special day, family complete." Family complete without me. There was no invitation, no conversation, no explanation. I found out my daughter got married the same way any stranger finds news on the internet. My heart broke in a way I hadn't even felt when Elijah passed. Sitting there in my kitchen in Atlanta with the mug shaking in my hand, I realized that to Hope, I might no longer exist as a mother, but merely as an inconvenient memory of the past. I called her 3 times that day. They all went straight to voicemail. I sent messages pretending I hadn't seen anything, asking if everything was okay, if she needed anything. The response only came late that afternoon. "I'm fine, Mama. We'll talk later." We'll talk later, as if her own daughter's wedding was a minor issue that could be put off. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized I had spent my entire life being a mother to someone who no longer needed me. And in that silence of the early morning, a new Clara Mae began to wake up inside me. Over the next few days, memories came in like ocean waves. I remembered when Hope was 5 years old and got pneumonia. I worked all day cleaning the Rodwell family's home in Buckhead and sewed at night for the Miller family in Sandy Springs. For 15 days, I barely slept 3 hours a night, taking care of her, driving her to the doctor, buying those expensive medicines. When she finally recovered, she hugged me and said, "Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to get married, and you're going to be the prettiest maid of honor in the world." Those words had lived in my heart for more than 20 years. I also remembered her Sweet 16 party. I had been saving for 2 years to throw her a memorable celebration. I sold some jewelry from my marriage, I worked extra shifts on the weekends, I deprived myself of basic things. We rented the Magnolia Room in the Midtown neighborhood. I bought the most beautiful dress I could find. I hired a great DJ. I prepared all the soul food myself. That day, Hope told me I was the best mother in the world, that she would remember everything I had done for her forever. The guests commented that the love was visible in every detail of the party. I thought about the everyday sacrifices. The mornings I got up at 5 to make her breakfast before school. The afternoons I spent helping her with homework, even though I hadn't finished high school myself. The nights I stayed awake waiting for her when she was out with friends, worrying about her safety. The Sundays I brought a pot of collard greens and ham hocks to Auntie Dolores's house so Hope could spend time with her father's family. When she went to college to study business administration, I increased my work hours. I cleaned the Rodwell's house Monday through Friday, and on weekends I worked catering social events, serving tables. I wanted her to focus only on studying, not worrying about money. Every time my knees ached after so many hours on my feet, or when my hands cracked from cleaning, I thought about the bright future Hope would have thanks to her education. During those college years, she began to change subtly. She didn't come home straight after class anymore. She had study sessions, group projects, extracurricular activities. On weekends, she went out with friends to places that were completely foreign to me. When I asked about her day, the answers got shorter, more distant. "It was fine, Mama. I'll tell you later." But later never came. It was during her final year of college that she met Devin Hayes. The first time she mentioned him, I noticed a special light in her eyes. She talked about him constantly, how smart he was, how he came from a good family, how he had ambitious plans for the future. I was happy to see her happy, but I also felt a pang of something I couldn't identify. Then it was as if Devin represented a world I didn't belong to, a future where there wouldn't be space for a mother who cleaned other people's homes. The first time Devin came over for dinner, I cooked baked mac and cheese, fried chicken, candied yams, cornbread, and sweet tea. I put in more effort than ever. I wanted to make a good impression. Devin was polite and courteous, but I noticed his eyes scanning our small home with an expression I couldn't decipher. Hope seemed nervous, constantly explaining things as if she had to justify our way of living. "Your house is very nice, Mrs. Harrison," Devin said when he left, but there was something in his tone that made me feel like he had said the opposite. That night, Hope told me I had been too intense, asking so many questions about his family, his job, and his plans. "Mama, not everyone is like us, sharing their whole life in the first conversation." That was the first time I felt I was being viewed as a problem to solve. From then on, Devin's visits became less frequent. When he came, the conversations were more superficial, more formal. Hope started spending more time with him, coming home later and later. Sunday family gatherings became occasional, then sporadic, until they disappeared completely. "Devin and I have plans" became the most common phrase in her vocabulary. When Hope graduated, I was so proud I cried through the entire ceremony. She had achieved what I never could, finishing a college degree. She was going to have opportunities I never had. After graduation, we went to celebrate at a nice restaurant in Dakar. Devin had also invited his parents, Franklin and Eleanor Hayes. It was the first time I met them formally. Franklin was a manager at a big company in Sandy Springs. Eleanor had been a teacher for many years before retiring. They talked about trips, fancy restaurants, and Broadway shows. I'd tried to participate in the conversation, but I felt like a fish out of water. When I mentioned that I worked cleaning houses, there was an awkward silence that Hope quickly filled by changing the subject. That night, when we got home, Hope said something that hurt me deeply. "Mama, I know you always try to be friendly, but sometimes you say things that can be misinterpreted. Devin's parents are very refined people." Refined? That word stuck in my mind. I wasn't refined. My love, my sacrifice, my dedication, they didn't count for anything compared to money and formal education. The following months were marked by increasing distance. Hope got a job at a big international company. Devin also had a good job. They started talking about getting their own place, renting an apartment together. I supported the idea, though my heart was breaking inside. "Young people need their space," I said, faking enthusiasm. When they finally moved into an exclusive part of Atlanta, I was still welcome, but with schedules and conditions. "Mama, you'd better call before you come over to see if we're around," Hope told me. The spontaneity of simply showing up to visit my daughter was gone forever. Now I had to make an appointment as if I were visiting a doctor or a dentist. The visits became more and more spaced out. First every week, then every 2 weeks, then once a month. When I went, the conversation mainly revolved around their jobs, their plans, their friends. I listened with interest, but they rarely asked about my life. It was as if I only existed for them, as if my only identity was being Hope's mother. During the holiday season last year, I noticed Hope and Devin had started spending more time with the Hayes family. "Well, Devin's parents have really beautiful traditions," Hope explained when I asked if they would come over for Christmas Eve dinner, as we had always done. "But next year we'll host, right?" Next year never came. Or rather, it came without me. It was in February when Hope told me she and Devin were thinking about getting married. "That's wonderful, baby," I exclaimed, feeling a mix of joy and anticipation. I immediately started making mental plans. The church, the dress, the flowers, the food. "Have you set a date? How can I help?" "Mama, we want something simple," Hope said, but there was something evasive in her look. "Nothing too elaborate. Weddings aren't as complicated as they used to be." I nodded, though I felt a small disappointment inside. I had dreamed for years of helping to plan my only daughter's wedding. The months passed, and conversations about the wedding became vague and sporadic. When I asked about specific details, Hope always had the same answer. "We're still looking into it, Mama. I'll let you know as soon as we have something finalized." I started to feel like something wasn't right, but I didn't know what exactly. In May, I noticed Hope started posting more photos on Facebook. Pictures with Devin, with the Hayeses, at fancy restaurants, in places I didn't recognize. But when we saw each other in person, she told me very little about these events. It was as if she had two parallel lives, one she shared with me and one she lived in secret. It was early June when I started to suspect something was definitely going on. Hope canceled 3 dates in a row to see me, always with excuses about work or urgent commitments. When we finally met, she seemed distracted, nervous. I asked her directly if everything was okay with Devin, if there was a problem. "Everything is perfect, Mama," she said, not looking me in the eye. "It's just that we're so busy with work and other things." Other things? Those words resonated in my mind for days. What other things could be more important than including her mother in her life? The last time I spoke to Hope before discovering the truth was on a Sunday afternoon. I called to invite her to breakfast the following Tuesday. "I can't, Mama," she said. "I have a very important meeting that morning." That was odd because Tuesday mornings had always been our special time since she was little. It was the only day of the week I didn't work at the Rodwell's house. "How about Wednesday then?" I insisted. "I don't know, Mama. Let me check my schedule and I'll call you back." But she never called me back, and I, as I always had, waited patiently for her call that never came. It was that Tuesday morning, exactly when I should have been having breakfast with my daughter, that I sat down in my kitchen with my coffee and a slice of pecan Danish. I logged on to Facebook to see photos of my neighbors and their grandkids, and I stumbled upon the image that would change my life forever. There was Hope, more beautiful than ever, in a simple but elegant wedding dress, smiling next to Devin in what was clearly a marriage ceremony. In the background were the happy faces of Franklin and Eleanor Hayes, dressed elegantly, posing as the only witnesses to that moment that should have been mine, too. The photo description read, "Finally married. Thank you to our families for making this day perfect." Our families in plural, but I didn't appear anywhere. I wasn't in the picture. I wasn't in the comments. I wasn't in that story that was supposed to include my entire life. I read every comment on that post. college friends congratulating, coworkers sending blessings, some distant relatives expressing surprise that they hadn't heard about the wedding. But no comment mentioned my absence. It was as if I had never existed in Hope's life, as if those 28 years of sacrifice and love had been completely erased from her personal story. I spent the rest of that day in a state of shock. I checked my phone over and over, hoping for a call, a text, an explanation. Nothing. Hope had gone on with her normal life, posting honeymoon photos, thanking people for congratulations, sharing moments of happiness from which I had been completely excluded. That night, lying awake and looking at the ceiling of my small bedroom, I understood something that hurt more than I imagined possible. My daughter hadn't forgotten to include me in her wedding. She had consciously excluded me. She had made a deliberate choice that I would not be part of the most important day of her life. And in that moment of painful clarity, I knew that my life, as I had known it until then, was over forever. But what Hope didn't know was that her mother, Clara May, had stored up much more than just pain during all those years of sacrifice. She had also stored a strength she herself didn't know she possessed, a dignity that had been dormant but never dead, and a capacity for decision that was about to change everything forever. The woman who got out of that bed on Wednesday morning was no longer the same woman who had patiently waited to be included in her daughter's life. She was a woman who had finally understood that some absences speak louder than any presence, and that sometimes the greatest love a mother can show is respect for her own dignity. In that silent pre-dawn hour in Atlanta, as the bells of St. Jude's Episcopal Church rang at 3 a.m., Clara May Harrison made the first completely self-directed decision she had made in nearly 30 years. If she was no longer welcome in Hope's life, then Hope would no longer be welcome in hers. But this story was just beginning, and what came next would change the lives of everyone involved in ways none of them could have imagined. The following days passed in a dense fog that prevented me from clearly seeing where my life was headed. Hope didn't call to explain, didn't show up at the house, didn't show any sign of remorse. She continued posting honeymoon photos from Cabo Lucas, Mexico, as if nothing had happened, as if I were just another follower on her social media. Every new photo was a confirmation that I truly was no longer a part of her life. I tried to keep myself busy with household chores, with Wednesday Mass at St. Jude's, with talks with Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, my lifelong neighbor. But no matter how much I tried to hide it, the pain was always there, causing a deep ache in my chest, like a constant presence that made it hard to breathe. It was while sorting through old papers in the wooden trunk that had belonged to my mother that the memories came rushing back in full force. I found birth certificates, immunization records that I'd kept so carefully, and school report cards where Hope always got straight A's. I remembered every sacrifice, the early mornings sewing dresses for ladies in the neighborhood to pay for Hope's English classes, the times I ate nothing but toast and jam so she could have meat on her plate, the birthday gifts I saved for all year to buy. I recalled the times she came home crying because her friends had designer clothes, and I would go to the Sweet Auburn Curb Market the next day to buy exactly what she wanted, even if it meant delaying the rent that month. Through all those years, Hope always had an excuse for not fully including me in her life. First, it was her studies, then work, then her boyfriend, Devin, who didn't get along with mother-in-laws. I always accepted, I always understood, I always adapted to her schedule, her whims, her decisions. But now, looking back, I realized that I had become smaller and smaller in her life, occupying increasingly minimal spaces until I reached the point of not even knowing she was getting married. The Hope I raised, the one I loved unconditionally, the one I always put first, had become a stranger who only shared crumbs of attention with me when it suited her. That Thursday afternoon, as I organized family photos into a shoebox,
I found one that made me cry harder than I had cried in years. It was from Hope's confirmation ceremony. She was 8 years old. She wore a beautiful white dress that I had asked a local seamstress to make. In the photo, Hope was hugging me tightly and smiling with a pure, genuine happiness. I was smiling too, but now I could see in my eyes from that time something I had lost, the certainty that I was loved unconditionally by my daughter. I remembered that day perfectly. I had saved for 6 months for that celebration. I rented the Magnolia Room Hall. I invited the whole family. I prepared barbecue, potato salad, sweet tea, and a huge red velvet cake I specially ordered. Hope felt like a princess, running from table to table, introducing me to everyone as my mama, the most beautiful in the world. That night, when everyone had left, she helped me pick up the dishes and said, "Mama, when I grow up and have my own parties, you're always going to be the most important person, always." Tears ran down my cheeks as I held that photograph. What happened to that little girl who promised me I would always be the most important person? When did I become so insignificant that I didn't even deserve to be present at her wedding? I continued looking through the photos and found another one that hurt just as much. Hope at 15, the day of her Sweet 16 party. We had rented a hall in the Midtown neighborhood. There was a DJ, food for 150 people, and a live band for the waltz. I had worked double shifts for a whole year to give her that party. I cleaned houses by day, babysat children at night, sold sweet potato pies at the farmer's market on weekends, all to see her happy, to give her the celebration she deserved. In that photo, Hope and I were dancing together, mother and daughter, during one of the songs. She had asked me to play a song she called our special song. "Mama, you used to sing this to me when I was little and sick, and it always made me feel better," she had told me. "I want us to dance to it together so everyone knows how much I love you." Those words echoed in my mind like sounds from another life. How had I gone from being the person who comforted her when she was sick to being someone she was ashamed of in front of her new family? I kept looking and found a letter Hope had written me when she was 18, just before starting college. She had written it on pink paper with careful handwriting full of little drawn hearts in the margins. It read, "Dearest Mama, tomorrow I start a new stage in my life, but I want you to know that nothing I achieve will be possible without everything you have done for me. You are my hero, my role model, the bravest woman I know. When I grow up, I want to be a mother like you, loving, sacrificial, who always puts family first. I love you with all my heart, and you will always be the most important person in my life. Your loving daughter, Hope." I read that letter 3 times before I could believe what I was reading. This was the same person who had just excluded me from the most important day of her life, the same one who had promised me I would always be the most important person. I sat on my bed with the letter shaking in my hands and cried like I hadn't cried since the day I buried Elijah. I cried for the girl who wrote those words and for the woman she had become. I cried for all the dreams I had about being the mother of the bride. I cried for all the times I imagined helping her choose the dress, organizing the bridal shower, walking her down the aisle. I cried for the mother-daughter relationship I thought we had, which apparently only existed in my imagination. After the crying came the rage, a rage I had never felt in my 67 years. How dare she treat me like this after everything I had done for her? How could she be so cruel, so ungrateful? I had sacrificed my youth, my social life, my own dreams, all for her. I had worked until my bones ached so she could have opportunities I never had. And this was how she repaid me? With humiliation, exclusion, and oblivion. But after the rage came something worse, shame. I started asking myself if somehow it was my fault. Had I been too intense, too clingy, too unsophisticated for Hope's new refined life? I remembered the faces of Franklin and Eleanor Hayes when they met me, that subtle expression I hadn't been able to interpret then, but that I now understood clearly, pity mixed with discomfort. To them, I was the embarrassing mother-in-law who had to be tolerated, not accepted. I got up from the bed and looked at myself in the vanity mirror. There was Clara May Harrison, 67 years old, gray hair, hands rough from so much work, wrinkles around my eyes that spoke of years of worry. I wasn't elegant like Eleanor Hayes. I hadn't traveled the world. I didn't speak any other languages. I didn't know about fine wines or theater. I was a simple woman who had done the best she could with what she had. But did that make me less valuable? Did that justify my own daughter treating me like I didn't exist? I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake thinking about all the signs I ignored, all the moments I should have realized I was losing my daughter, the phone calls that got shorter, the visits that required prior appointment. Everything had been gradual, so subtle that I hadn't realized I was being systematically excluded from Hope's life. On Friday morning, I called my sister, Auntie Rosa, who lives in Birmingham, Alabama. I needed to talk to someone, vent, ask for advice. Auntie Rosa had always been the most direct of my sisters, the one who told things straight. "She got married without telling you?" Auntie Rosa shouted when I told her what had happened. "That girl is crazy. How can a daughter do that to her mother?" I told her the whole story, from the first changes in Hope's attitude to the discovery of the wedding on Facebook. Auntie Rosa listened without interrupting, which was rare for her. "Clara May," she finally said in a serious voice, "I always told you that you gave too much to that girl. You spoiled her since she was little. You put her on a pedestal, and now you see the consequences. Kids need boundaries. They need to understand that respect is earned and maintained." Her words hurt because I knew they contained some truth. I had always indulged Hope. I had always given in to her tantrums. I had always put her needs before mine. But I had done it out of love, because I wanted her to have everything I couldn't have. "So what am I supposed to do now?" I asked, sobbing. "Now you're going to do what you should have done years ago. You're going to live for yourself," Auntie Rosa replied firmly. "Hope has already made her decision about what place you occupy in her new life. Now it's your turn to decide what place she occupies in your new life." After hanging up with Auntie Rosa, I sat in the kitchen for hours thinking about her words. She was right. Hope had clearly demonstrated what place I occupied in her new life. None. It was time for me to also make a decision about what place she would occupy in my new life. On Friday morning, as I drank my coffee and ate my pecan Danish, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I heard Hope's voice. "Mama, how are you?" she asked in a cheerful voice, as if nothing had happened. "Guess what? We're back from our honeymoon. Cabo was amazing. Devin and I want to stop by this afternoon to tell you everything." To tell me everything? After 2 weeks of silence, after excluding me from her wedding, now she wanted to tell me everything as if I were a casual friend she was catching up with about her vacation? "What time are you planning to come?" "Around 5. We'll bring pictures and some gifts we bought you." Cheese souvenirs from Cabo San Lucas could compensate for the greatest humiliation of my life. "All right," I said. "I'll be here." After hanging up, I stood there with the phone in my hand, feeling a mix of emotions I didn't know how to manage. Part of me was happy to finally see my daughter, to be able to hug her and tell her how much I had missed her. But another part of me, a part that grew with every passing hour, was furious at the coldness with which she had treated me, at the casual way she assumed everything would be fine after what she had done. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the house, making sweet tea, buying fresh pecan Danish from the local bakery. It was what I always did when Hope came to visit. I made sure everything was perfect to receive her. But this time, as I mopped the floor and dusted the furniture, I wondered why I was still trying so hard for someone who clearly didn't value my efforts. At 5 on the dot, Hope and Devin arrived. Hope looked radiant, tanned from the beach sun, wearing new clothes and looking completely happy. Devon wore a courteous but distant smile, the same one he always had when he came to my house. "Mama!" Hope cried, hugging me as if we were the best friends in the world. "I missed you. Look how tanned I got." I hugged her back, inhaling her expensive perfume, which wasn't the same one she used when she lived with me. Everything about her was different. Her clothes, her hairstyle, her way of speaking. It was as if the Hope I knew had been replaced by a new, improved version that didn't include me. "Have a seat," I said. I served them sweet tea and offered them fresh pecan Danish. "Oh, Mama, this looks so good," Hope said, but I noticed she barely touched the pastry. She probably didn't eat that kind of thing anymore. Her new sophisticated life didn't include treats from the neighborhood bakery. "All right, tell me everything," I said, sitting across from them in my small living room. "How was the wedding?" Hope exchanged a quick glance with Devon before answering. "It was very nice, Mama, very simple, just like we wanted, nothing too elaborate." "Oh, and where was it?" I asked, though my heart was already shrinking. "In a beautiful little chapel, Indicator. Very intimate, very private, just us and Devon's parents as witnesses." Just Dem and Devon's parents, as if I didn't exist, as if 23 years of raising her didn't give me the right to be there. "And why didn't you tell me anything?" I finally asked, my voice trembling. Hope sighed and put on the face she used to make when she was a child caught doing something wrong. "Mama, it all happened so fast. You know how those bureaucratic things are. Suddenly the date came up and we decided not to complicate things. Besides, you know I never liked big parties." It was a lie. Hope had always loved big parties. Her sweet 16, her graduation, all the celebrations we had shared had been with lots of guests, lots of food, and lots of joy. But now, for her wedding, she had decided she wanted an intimate affair that didn't include me. "But Mama," Hope continued in a syrupy voice, "that's why we came today, to celebrate with you. Look at all the gifts we brought you." She pulled out a bag full of typical souvenirs from Cabo, a ceramic ashtray, some seashells, a t-shirt that read, "I love Cabo," some coconut candies. Gifts they had probably bought at the airport, thinking, "Oh, we have to bring something back for Hope's mom." "Thank you, baby," I said, feeling like each gift was a slap in the face disguised as kindness. We spent 2 hours talking about the honeymoon, the places they visited, the fancy restaurants where they ate, the activities they did. It was like looking at vacation photos of strangers. I nodded, smiled, and asked appropriate questions, but inside I felt like something was breaking for good. When they left, after vague promises to see each other soon and an invitation to see the new apartment, I was left alone in my living room, surrounded by the cheap souvenirs, feeling the weight of the silence they had left behind. That night, as I stored the gifts in a drawer where I knew I would never see them again, I made a decision that would change everything. If Hope could live without including me in the important moments of her life, then I could also learn to live without including her in the important moments of mine. And in that silence of the early morning, with my heart still hurting, but with a new determination growing inside me, I started planning the first step of my new life. A life where I was the protagonist, not just the sacrificial mother waiting for crumbs of attention. The Clara May who had waited all her life for others to decide her place in the world died that night. The one who would wake up the next day would be a completely different woman, a woman who had finally understood that respect is taught by example, and that sometimes the greatest love a mother can show is love for her own dignity. Sunday dawned with a clear sky that completely contrasted with the storm I carried inside. I got up earlier than usual, at 5 a.m., and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that heaviness in my chest that had accompanied me since I discovered the wedding. In its place was something different, a cold clarity I had never experienced before. It was as if during the night I had gone through a silent transformation, as if the Clara May who had waited all her life for others to define her place in the world had finally awakened from a very long sleep. I made my black coffee, stronger than usual. I needed my mind to be completely clear for what I was about to do. I sat down at the kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast for the last 15 years, where I had waited for so many calls from Hope that never came, where I had planned special meals for visits that were canceled at the last minute. But this time, as I mopped the floor and dusted the furniture, that table no longer represented waiting or disappointment. It represented the place where Clara May Harrison was going to make the most important decision of her life. I took out an old notebook where I used to write down Hope's doctor's appointments when she was little, important school dates, and her friends' birthdays. Now I was going to use those yellowed pages to plan something completely different, my definitive exit from a life where I was no longer welcome. On the first page, I wrote, "Plan for Independence, Clara May Harrison, August 12, 2024. The date looked strange written in my shaky handwriting, but the words felt more real than anything I had felt in years. The first thing I wrote was, "Assess resources." During all those years of sacrifice, I had managed to save a considerable amount. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't unprotected either. I had the savings of a lifetime of work, a small but owned house in an area that had become very valuable, and something Hope never knew, a secret bank account where I had deposited the extra money I earned sewing dresses for neighborhood ladies on weekends for years. I had opened that account when Hope turned 18, thinking it would be my wedding gift to her. Every dollar I deposited there, I did so imagining the moment I would give it to her. "My daughter, this is so you can start your marriage without debt, so you can have your own home, so you don't go through the difficulties I did." For 10 years I had nourished that account with the illusion of seeing the happy look on Hope's face when she found out about the surprise. But now, after being excluded from her wedding, that money would take a completely different path. The second point on my list was research housing options. I couldn't stay in this house where every corner reminded me of the years of waiting, where every phone call would make me think it might be Hope seeking reconciliation.
I needed a new place, a space that was completely mine, where I could build a life that didn't depend on crumbs of attention from my daughter. I remembered that Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, my lifelong neighbor, had always told me about her sister Gloria, who had moved to a residential community for older adults in Decatur. "It's wonderful, Claire," Mrs. Rodriguez had told me several times. "There are activities, security, people our age. Gloria says she's never felt so free in her life." At the time, I thought those places were for people who didn't have family to care for them. Now, I understood they were for people who had decided to care for themselves. The third point was the most painful, but the most necessary: gradually cut ties. I couldn't just disappear overnight because that would cause unnecessary drama and give Hope reasons to justify her behavior. My mom was always so dramatic. That's why we didn't include her in important things. No, my exit had to be as silent and dignified as my entry into Devin Hayes's life had been. Gradual, respectful, but definitive. After breakfast, I showered and put on my Sunday navy blue dress, the one I wore to Mass at St. Jude's. But this morning, I wasn't going to church. I was going to begin the most important investigation of my life. I grabbed my purse, put the notebook inside, and left my house with a determination I hadn't felt in years. My first stop was the bank. It was strange walking the streets of my neighborhood, knowing that every step took me away from the life I had known for 67 years. Mr. Fernando Lawson, the executive who had managed my accounts for the last 10 years, was surprised to see me near the ATM on a Sunday morning. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison," he greeted me when he recognized me. "Everything's fine?" "Perfect, Mr. Lawson," I replied with a smile I didn't expect to have myself. "I'm just reviewing my financial options. I might need to make some moves this week." "Of course, ma'am. I'm available Monday if you'd like to review your accounts in detail." "I appreciate it very much. I'll see you Monday then." That small conversation gave me more energy than I expected. For the first time in years, someone spoke to me like a person capable of making important financial decisions, not like an old lady who needed others to manage her money. From there, I went straight to Decatur, to the residential community Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned. It was called the Legacy at Peachtree, and as soon as I got off the bus, I could see why my neighbor's sister liked it so much. It was a beautiful, clean place, with well-kept gardens and an atmosphere of tranquility I hadn't felt in years. The receptionist, a very kind woman named Patricia, welcomed me with a genuine smile when I explained I was interested in seeing the facilities. "I'm glad you came," she said enthusiastically. "We just happened to have 2 very nice apartments available. Would you like a full tour?" For the next 2 hours, Patricia showed me every corner of the Legacy at Peachtree. The apartments were small but comfortable, perfect for one person. They had a living dining room, 1 bedroom, a full bathroom, and an equipped kitchenette. What I liked most was the balcony overlooking the gardens, where I could imagine myself drinking my coffee in the mornings and watching the sunset in the evenings. "We have lots of activities," Patricia explained as we walked through the common areas. "On Mondays, we have a yoga class. Tuesdays are for knitting and crafts. Wednesdays are mass in the internal chapel. Thursdays are ballroom dancing, and Fridays are movie nights. On weekends, we organize excursions to different places: Savannah, Charleston, Asheville." Every activity she mentioned sounded like something I might enjoy, things I had never done because I was always waiting for Hope's schedule availability. "And are the people who live here happy?" I asked. "Look, Mrs. Harrison," Patricia told me honestly, "most of our residents come here after complicated family situations. Some have lost their partners, others have children who live far away, others simply decided they wanted to live with more independence. At first, many arrive sad, nostalgic, but after a few months, you see them and they seem like different people, happier, more active, more, how should I put it, more alive." Her words resonated deeply with me. More alive. How long had it been since I truly felt alive? How many years had I spent simply existing, waiting for my daughter to include me in her life? "What are the requirements to live here?" I asked. Patricia explained the whole process. I had to be over 60 years old, check, have stable income to cover the monthly fee, I had savings for several years, and pass a basic medical evaluation to ensure I could live independently. My health was excellent. The monthly cost included maintenance, security, activities, and basic utilities. It was a considerable amount, but perfectly manageable with my savings. "How long does the admission process take?" I asked. "If you bring all the documents this week, we could have everything ready in 2 weeks," Patricia replied. "Are you interested in any of the apartments you saw?" I looked again toward the balcony of the apartment I liked most, the one that faced the garden, where I had seen several residents chatting animatedly under the shade of a big tree. In that moment, I made a decision that surprised me with how quick and clear it was. "I'll take the one with the balcony facing the gardens," I said without hesitation. "Excellent decision," exclaimed Patricia. "That's one of the most requested. Here's the list of documents you need to bring and the contract for you to review carefully." I returned home that afternoon with a feeling I hadn't felt in years: genuine hope. Not the hope that hope would change, not the hope that things would go back to how they were, but the hope of a new life that depended solely on my own decisions. That night, instead of watching TV as I did every Sunday, I dedicated myself to organizing my documents: birth certificate, proof of income, bank statements, identification. It was strange preparing paperwork to start a new life at 67, but every document I organized made me feel more certain of my decision. On Monday morning, I went to the bank exactly at 9 a.m. when they opened. Mr. Fernando Lawson greeted me with the same professional courtesy as always, but when I explained I needed to make some major moves in my accounts for a personal investment, I noticed a respect in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm delighted to hear you're making proactive financial decisions," he said as he reviewed my bank statements. "I see you've been very disciplined with your savings all these years. You have very solid resources." Hearing those words filled me with a confidence I didn't know I had. For so many years, I had lived with the mindset that I was a person of limited resources, someone who depended on the charity of others. But the reality was that I had worked hard, saved diligently, and built a solid financial foundation without anyone's help. "I need to make a significant transfer to my checking account," I explained, "and I also want to know about safe investments that give me monthly income." For the next hour, Mr. Lawson explained different investment options that could give me regular income without touching the principal capital. It was information I had never sought out before, because I always thought my money was meant exclusively for emergencies or for helping Hope. Now I saw that I had options, that I could make my money work for me instead of just keeping it for others. From there, I went straight to Decatur, to the residential community Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned. It was called the Legacy at Peachtree, and as soon as I got off the bus, I could see why my neighbor's sister liked it so much. It was a beautiful, clean place, with well-kept gardens and an atmosphere of tranquility I hadn't felt in years. The receptionist, a very kind woman named Patricia, welcomed me with a genuine smile when I explained I was interested in seeing the facilities. "I'm glad you came," she said enthusiastically. "We just happen to have 2 very nice apartments available. Would you like a full tour?" For the next 2 hours, Patricia showed me every corner of the Legacy at Peachtree. The apartments were small but comfortable, perfect for one person. They had a living dining room, 1 bedroom, a full bathroom, and an equipped kitchenette. What I liked most was the balcony overlooking the gardens, where I could imagine myself drinking my coffee in the mornings and watching the sunset in the evenings. "We have lots of activities," Patricia explained as we walked through the common areas. "On Mondays, we have a yoga class. Tuesdays are for knitting and crafts. Wednesdays are mass in the internal chapel. Thursdays are ballroom dancing, and Fridays are movie nights. On weekends, we organize excursions to different places: Savannah, Charleston, Asheville." Every activity she mentioned sounded like something I might enjoy, things I had never done because I was always waiting for Hope's schedule availability. "And are the people who live here happy?" I asked. "Look, Mrs. Harrison," Patricia told me honestly, "most of our residents come here after complicated family situations. Some have lost their partners, others have children who live far away, others simply decided they wanted to live with more independence. At first, many arrive sad, nostalgic, but after a few months, you see them and they seem like different people, happier, more active, more, how should I put it, more alive." Her words resonated deeply with me. More alive. How long—
"Is everything okay, Mama?" she asked on the second call. "You sound different." "Everything is perfect, baby," I replied with complete honesty. "I'm just organizing some things at the house. You know how it is. Do you need help with anything?" The question would have thrilled me before. Now it simply confirmed that Hope still saw me as someone who needed help, not as someone capable of solving her own problems. "No thank you, baby. Everything is under control." On Friday of that week, I got the call from Patricia at the Legacy at Peachtree. My application had been approved and I could move in the following Monday if I wanted. That night, alone in my house, surrounded by packed boxes and furniture covered with sheets, I didn't feel sadness or nostalgia. I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, the excitement of starting something new. On Saturday morning, as I had my last coffee at the kitchen table where I had planned so many special meals for Hope, my phone rang. It was her. "Mama, Devin and I want to invite you to dinner tomorrow, Sunday. We're going to try out the new dining room at the apartment." It was the invitation I had waited for months. They finally wanted to include me in something, show me their new home, treat me like a part of their life. But it was too late. "Oh, baby, that's a shame," I replied in a serene voice. "I already have plans tomorrow." "Plans with who?" "With some new friends. We're going on a little day trip to Lake Lanier." It wasn't a lie. The residents of the Legacy at Peachtree had a trip scheduled for Sunday, and I had already signed up. "But Mama, we can change it to another day. It's important to us that you see our home." "Thank you, baby, but I'm already committed. Maybe another time when I have more time." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Hope was not used to me having plans that didn't involve waiting for her. "Well, okay, we'll organize something later." "Sure, baby. Have a wonderful dinner." When I hung up, I stayed seated in that familiar kitchen for the last time, smiling with deep satisfaction. For the first time in my life, Hope had had to adjust to my schedule instead of me adjusting to hers. It was a small change, but it symbolized a much bigger transformation. Clara May Harrison had stopped being a woman waiting to be included and had become a woman who had her own life, her own plans, her own happiness. On Sunday night, after returning from a beautiful day trip to Lake Lanier, where I had met 3 lovely women who would become my new neighbors, I packed my last personal belongings. The move would be early Monday, and by noon I would be settled in my new home. That last night in the house where I had raised Hope, I didn't cry or feel nostalgic. Instead, I felt a deep gratitude towards the woman I had been and a genuine excitement for the woman I was becoming. I had made the bravest decision of my life, choosing my own happiness over waiting for the approval of others. Early Monday, as the movers loaded my few belongings, I looked one last time at every room in the house. In Hope's bedroom, now completely empty, I whispered a silent farewell. "Thank you for teaching me that true love sometimes means knowing when to walk away." The Clara May who walked out of that house that Monday morning was a completely new woman, a woman who had learned that dignity is not negotiable, that respect is taught by example, and that it is never too late to start over when you make the right decision. As the moving truck drove away toward Dakar, toward my new life at the Legacy at Peachtree, I sat in the passenger seat, smiling toward the future. For the first time in 67 years, I didn't know exactly what awaited me, and that uncertainty felt like the most beautiful freedom in the world. My first week at the Legacy at Peachtree passed like a beautiful dream I didn't want to wake up from. Every morning I woke up in my new cozy apartment, made my coffee in the kitchenette that was entirely mine, and went out onto the balcony to look at the gardens where I had already identified my new neighbors. There was Mrs. Mercedes, 72, who had been an elementary school teacher for 40 years, Mrs. Delanore, 69, who had worked in a government office and had fascinating stories of her youth, and Mr. Alexander, 75, a widower like me, who had been a carpenter and now made small furniture to give as gifts to his new friends. It was strange to feel part of a group where I was valued for who I was, not for what I could do for others. At community meals, my new friends asked me about my life, my opinions, my plans. No one saw me as somebody's mother or the awkward mother-in-law. I was simply Clara May, a woman with her own stories, her own dreams, her own personality. On Wednesday of my first week, I participated in the knitting class led by Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, an elegant 74-year-old woman who had been a dressmaker in her youth. While embroidering flowers on a napkin, I realized I hadn't done anything purely for pleasure in years, without thinking about whether Hope would like it or if it would be useful for the house. "You know what, Claire?" Mrs. Rodriguez said as she checked my work. "You have great hand for this. You should come to every class." It was a simple compliment, but it touched my heart.
How long had it been since I received recognition for something I had done well? In my previous life, my achievements were always measured by how much they helped Hope. Now, for the first time, someone valued my work for its own sake. Thursday was my first ballroom dancing class. Mr. Alexander Davis, a very distinguished 76-year-old man who had been a physical education teacher, led the classes with contagious joy and patience. At first, I was embarrassed because I hadn't danced in decades, but Mr. Davis reassured me. "No one judges here, Claire," he said with a kind smile. "We come here to have fun, and remember that it's never too late to learn new things." During that class, I danced the cha-cha, the waltz, and even a little salsa. I laughed harder than I had laughed in years. My classmates applauded when I managed a difficult step, helped me when I got confused, and made me feel like a real family, a family that had chosen me and that I had chosen too. That night, as I ate dinner alone in my apartment, but without feeling lonely, my phone rang. It was Hope. "Mama, where are you?" she asked, her voice frantic. "I went to the house and it's completely empty. The neighbors said you moved out. What is going on?" Her voice had a mix of confusion and panic that I hadn't heard since she was little and got lost at the market. For a moment, my maternal instinct wanted to reassure her immediately, explain everything, assure her that I was fine. But the new Clara May, who had emerged in these last few weeks, kept her composure. "I'm doing very well, baby," I replied in a serene voice. "I moved to a place more suitable for my age."
More suitable? What does that mean? Why didn't you tell me anything? Because they were personal decisions that didn't require your approval, I said firmly, but without aggression. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Hope was not used to me making important decisions without consulting her, even though she had been making hers for years without consulting me. "Where are you living now?" "In a place where I'm happy, baby. That's what matters." "Mama, you're scaring me. This isn't normal for you. Are you mad at me about something?" The question would have disarmed me before. I would have rushed to explain that I wasn't mad, that I loved her, that I just wanted us to be happy together. But now I saw that question for what it really was, an attempt to return to the old dynamic where I was responsible for managing her emotions. "I'm not mad, Hope. I'm living my life." "What does that mean?" "It means I finally understood that I have the right to make my own decisions, to have my own plans, to be happy without depending on the approval of others." Another silence. I could imagine Hope on the other end trying to process this version of her mother she didn't know. "Can you tell me where you are? Devin and I are worried." Devin and I. It was always Devin and I, as if they were a single entity making joint decisions about my life. But there was something in Hope's tone that was different. For the first time in a long time, she seemed genuinely worried about me, not just annoyed because I wasn't available when she needed me. "I'm at the Legacy at Peachtree in Decatur," I finally told her. "It's a very nice residential community for people my age." "A retirement home?" The word bothered me, but it didn't surprise me. To Hope, any place where older people lived was automatically a retirement home. "No, baby, it's a place where I live independently, but with the company of people who are at the same stage of life as me. I have my own apartment, my own activities, my own social life." Social life? There was genuine surprise in her voice, as if she had never considered that I could have a social life independent of her. "Yes, Hope, I have new friends, activities I enjoy, plans that don't include waiting for you to have time for me." The words came out more direct than I had planned, but I didn't regret saying them. It was time for Hope to understand the consequences of her decisions. "Mama, we have always had time for you." "Did you really have time to include me in your wedding?" The silence that followed was long and heavy. It was the first time I had directly mentioned the wedding exclusion, and we both knew it was the elephant in the room that had been present in all our subsequent conversations. "Mama, I already explained that it all happened so fast, that it was a very simple thing." "Hope," I interrupted her with a firm but calm voice, "I'm not interested in hearing any more excuses. What happened, happened. I'm not looking for apologies or explanations. I just want you to understand that decisions have consequences. What kind of consequences? The consequence that I finally understood that I'm not a priority in your life, and I've decided that you won't be a priority in mine either. The words came out with a clarity that surprised me. There was no anger in my voice, no resentment, only a quiet honesty that made me feel freer than I had felt in years. Does that mean you don't want to be my mother anymore? The question hurt because I could hear the little girl behind the adult woman, but it also strengthened me because it reminded me that Hope knew exactly what she had lost. I will always be your mother, baby, but I will no longer be the mother who waits for crumbs of your attention. I will no longer be the mother who accepts any treatment just to be present in your life. If you want a relationship with me, it will have to be a relationship of mutual respect. And what would that look like? It was the first time Hope specifically asked what I wanted from our relationship instead of simply assuming I would adapt to whatever she offered. I don't know yet, I answered honestly, but I know it can't be like before. After hanging up that night, I sat on my balcony watching the lights of Decatur, feeling a mix of sadness and liberation. It had been the hardest conversation of my life, but also the most necessary. For the first time, I had set clear boundaries with my daughter. I had expressed my feelings without trying to protect hers. I had placed my dignity above my desire to keep the peace. The following days passed without news from Hope, and for the first time her silence did not cause me anxiety. I was too busy discovering my new life to worry about interpreting her lack of communication. On Friday, I participated in the weekly excursion to downtown Atlanta, where we visited the Georgia State Capitol and ate at a traditional soul food restaurant near Centennial Olympic Park. On Saturday, I went to the yoga class for the first time in my life and discovered that my body was more flexible than I thought. On Sunday, after Mass at the Legacy at Peachtree in Decatur, I was returning to my apartment when Patricia, the receptionist, stopped me. "Mrs. Harrison, you have visitors," she said with a smile.
A young couple who say they're family. My heart sped up a little, but not with the anxiety of before. It was more curiosity to see what Hope and Devin wanted. I found them in the visitors' lounge, sitting together on one of the elegant sofas. Hope looked nervous, almost fragile, very different from the confident, successful woman she had been in our last encounters. Devin looked uncomfortable, as if he would rather be anywhere else. "Mama," Hope said, standing up when she saw me, "thank you for seeing us." It was strange that she thanked me for seeing them, as if she finally understood that she could no longer simply appear in my life uninvited. "Have a seat," I said, taking the chair across from them. "How are you?" "We're fine," Hope replied, though her voice suggested otherwise. "We wanted to come and see where you're living, to make sure you're comfortable." I looked around the visitors' lounge with its elegant furniture, its well-kept plants, its large windows that let in a lot of natural light. Then I looked at them, this young couple who had come to make sure I was comfortable, as if they had any right to approve of my life decisions. "As you can see, I'm very comfortable," I said with a genuine smile. "This place is perfect for me." "Yes, it looks very nice," Devin admitted, speaking for the first time. "It must be expensive, though." There it was, the real concern, not my happiness or my comfort, but how much of their inheritance I was spending. "Fortunately, I can pay for it without problems," I replied calmly. "It turns out I worked and saved more than you knew." I watched as Hope and Devin exchanged a quick glance. It was obvious they had talked about my financial situation before coming. "Mama, we don't want you to run out of money by living in a place like this," Hope said in a worried voice. "Why would I run out of money?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "Well, you always told us you had to watch every dollar. That money didn't go very far." It was true, for years I had told them that, but what I never explained was that it didn't go far because I constantly prioritized their needs over mine, because I saved money for their emergencies, instead of spending it on my own comfort. "It's true that I watched every dollar," I confirmed, "but it was because I was saving for you, to be able to help you when you needed it. Now that it's clear you don't need my help, I can use my money for my own happiness." "What do you mean we don't need your help?" Devin asked in a tense voice. "I mean you are successful, independent adults capable of making your own decisions without consulting me, including decisions as important as getting married. If you are independent enough for that, then you don't need me to save my money for your emergencies." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. I could see how they processed the logic of my words, how they realized they couldn't have both, total independence from me when it suited them, and access to my resources when they needed them. "Mama," Hope said finally, her voice softer, "are you very angry with me?" It was the question of a child, not an adult, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt a little compassion for her. But it was a different kind of compassion, not the blind compassion that had led me to excuse her behavior for years. "I'm not angry, baby," I told her honestly. "I'm disappointed. I'm sad. But above all, I am at peace." At peace? At peace with finally understanding who I am beyond being your mother. At peace with having discovered that I can be happy without depending on your approval or your attention. Hope remained silent for a moment, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "Does that mean you don't love me anymore?" It was the question I had been waiting for, and I had the answer ready. "I love you more than you can imagine, Hope, but I've learned that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to disrespect you. I've learned that true love includes boundaries, includes dignity, includes mutual respect. And what can we do to fix this?" Devin asked, speaking for the first time, as if he truly cared about the answer. I looked at both of them, this young couple who had come to fix the situation, probably hoping that with a visit and a few apologies, everything would return to normal. "There's nothing to fix," I said calmly. "I'm not broken, I'm not sick, I'm not acting out of spite. I am simply living the life I deserve to live. But can we still be family?" Hope asked, her voice trembling. "We will always be family," I assured her, "but it will be a different kind of family, one where we respect each other, where we include each other in the important things, where we treat each other as equal adults." "How do we know what you expect from us?" Devin asked. It was a practical question, and I appreciated his honesty. "Hope knows how to treat me with respect," I replied, looking directly at my daughter. "She did it for many years when she was younger. She just needs to remember how to do it." Hope nodded slowly, as if finally understanding that there was no quick fix, that she would have to do real work to rebuild our relationship. "Can we call you sometimes?" she asked in a small voice. "Of course," I said, "but I won't be available every time you call. I have my own life now, my own activities, my own commitments." It was strange saying those words. For 67 years, I had never had commitments I couldn't cancel for Hope. Now I had knitting classes, excursions, dinners with friends, a social life that was important to me. When they left that afternoon, after vague promises to maintain better communication and do things differently, I stayed seated in the visitors' lounge for a little while longer, processing what had happened. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no tears of remorse, no promises of immediate change, but there had been something more valuable: recognition. For the first time, Hope had recognized that she treated me poorly, that she made decisions that hurt me, and that she would have to make a real effort if she wanted a relationship with me. That night, during the community dinner in the dining hall at the Legacy at Peachtree, my new friends asked me about my visitors. "Everything okay with the family?" Mrs. Mercedes asked with genuine concern. "Everything is exactly as it should be," I replied with a smile. "For the first time in years, everything is exactly as it should be." And it was true. I didn't know if Hope and I would ever have a close relationship again. I didn't know if she would truly change or if she would simply learn how to manage me better. But I knew that I had changed forever, and no matter what happened to our relationship, I would be fine. The Clara who had waited for years for her daughter to include her in her life had died forever. In her place, a woman had been born who knew her worth, who had her own dreams, who was capable of being happy with or without the approval of others.
And that transformation, painful as it had been, was worth more than any reconciliation that required me to return to being the small, subservient woman I had been before. For the first time in my life, I was free, and that freedom felt like the most beautiful gift I had given myself. Today, 6 months later, I wake up every morning in my small but cozy apartment. I look out the window and see a different world. It's not a world without pain, but it's a world where I choose who is part of my story. I tend my plants on the patio, I read the books I always wanted to read, I frequent the new chapel where no one knows me as Hope's mother. I am simply Clara May Harrison, a 67-year-old woman who is learning to live for herself after decades of living exclusively for others. Sometimes I get calls from unknown numbers that I know are Hope trying to reach me through other people's phones. I hear her voice on the answering machine, always crying, always apologizing, always promising she will change. But some exclusions cause pain too deep to be healed just with words. Some rejections are too final to be forgiven with simple remorse. Hope had the opportunity to include me in the most important moment of her life, and she chose to leave me out. Now I choose to leave her out of my new life. During these months, I've learned that the loneliness I feared doesn't exist when you live in peace with yourself. My days are filled with activities that nourish my soul: knitting classes with Mrs. Rodriguez, Thursday dances with Mr. Davis, weekend excursions where I discover parts of Georgia and the South that I had never visited.
At community dinners, my friends listen to me attentively when I tell stories of my youth, when I share recipes I learned from my mother, when I give my opinion on the daytime soaps we watched together in the afternoons. Yesterday, at the grocery store, a lady recognized me and told me that Hope was offering a reward for anyone who knew my whereabouts. I smiled politely and replied that sometimes people find each other when they are ready to find each other. I don't feel rage, I don't feel vengeance, I don't feel hatred. I feel only the peace of someone who made the right decision at the right time. Hope learned in the most painful way possible that mothers also have feelings, that love has boundaries, and that some doors, once closed, never open again. Last week, I received a very formal letter delivered by a lawyer. It was from Hope, typed with no tears to smudge the ink, no shaky handwriting of emotion. In that letter, my daughter explained with a coldness that surprised me her reasons for excluding me from the wedding. She said it had been a practical decision, that the Hayeses had insisted on a small ceremony, that they hadn't wanted to hurt my feelings, but hadn't wanted to create conflicts with her new in-laws either. I read that letter 3 times before fully understanding what I was reading. Hope had reduced the most painful moment of my life to a practical decision. She had turned my exclusion into a matter of family diplomacy. There was no recognition of the harm she had caused me. There was no understanding of the sacrifice it had been for me to raise her alone. There was no gratitude for the years of unconditional love I had given her. That letter confirmed something I already knew in my heart. The Hope I had raised, the girl who promised me I would always be the most important person in her life, had disappeared forever. In her place was a woman who viewed our relationship as a social obligation that could be managed with efficiency, not as a sacred bond that deserved care and respect. I put the letter away in a wooden box, along with some old photographs that had resisted time, not out of spite, but because some words only need to be read, not answered. A mother's love doesn't end, it just changes form. My love for Hope transformed into something different: respect for my own dignity, care for my own happiness, protection for my own peace. This morning, as I water the plants on my patio and watch the sunrise over Dakar, I think of all the women who, like me, have spent their lives waiting to be valued by others. I think of the mothers who sacrifice their dreams for children, who later see them as awkward burdens. I think of the grandmothers who babysit for children who then tell them they're interfering too much. I think of all of us who learned that our worth depended on how much we could give to others, never on how much we deserve to receive. To all those women, I would tell them what I now know. It's never too late to choose your own happiness. It's never too late to set boundaries. It's never too late to decide that you deserve respect, that you deserve consideration, that you deserve to be treated as the valuable person you have always been. The freedom I feel now was not born of punishing hope, but of freeing myself. It was not born of revenge, but of self-respect. It was not born of hatred, but of the self-love that had been dormant for too many years. Last night, after community dinner, Mrs. Mercedes asked me if I ever regretted making this decision. "Don't you miss your daughter?" she asked, with the kindness of someone genuinely concerned about my well-being. "I miss the daughter I thought I had," I replied honestly, "but I don't miss the relationship we actually had, because that relationship was slowly killing me. It is the purest truth I have ever spoken. For years, I lived a fantasy where I believed Hope loved me the same way I loved her. The reality is that to Hope, I was a convenience when she needed me and a nuisance when she didn't. Accepting that reality was painful, but it was also liberating. Today, I write these words from my patio with the sound of the community garden fountain in the background, with the scent of the bougainvillea I planted last week, with the certainty that I chose the right path. I don't know what the future holds, but I know it will be a future where my happiness will not depend on the decisions of others. Sometimes the greatest acknowledgement is the silence one chooses to maintain, and in that silence, Clara May Harrison finally found her voice, her strength, and her peace. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.